The Use Display option identifies how you want to use a particular content element in a page. There are three basic options: inline, float, and referenced. So by default, when you put a content object in a page, its use is inline. It's going to appear on the page in the order that you add it. So if I edit this page, and I have two content elements here, two HTML parts, I can take either one of these. I'm going to move this up, and then I'm going to edit it so that we can actually look at the details of that part, and we'll see that its use is inline and left. So that's the default. So when I save it, they'll be listed in the order in which you find them in the page. Now there are other display options though. So there's a float option that you can use, and if I edit this and adjust the float option on my first part, the use option to float. Now if I change this, nothing really radical is going to happen in the page. I'm going to explain why. Okay, by default, content elements take up 100% of the width in the body of the page. Floating objects have to have width, a specified width, to float to the left or right of other objects. So if you want to make an object float left or right, you need to adjust the display size of that content element as well. So now I'm going to go back, inspect this page, edit this one HTML element, and now I'm going to go back and set its width. Now the width I'm going to set to 329 pixels because I happen to know that the content area of my page is 670 pixels wide, and I have a 12 pixel margin between items that are floating right or left. And I'm going to set this to float to the right. So when I save it, now my content element 2 is floating to the right of content element 1. Alright, so use is for inline position, and you can still place things left or right. Floating is if you want to float a content element to the right or left of another. So you can float many elements next to one another as long as you have the right space. And the biggest issues for most developers is not understanding the space that you have in the body of the page. If I turn on a Firebug debug, it's an easy thing to figure out on your site. So I typically would go and take a quick look at the details section, identify the width of this section here. So I can see the width is 670 pixels wide. And then once you know that, you can identify what the margins and things on your site, and you'll know how to fit these options next to one another. Now the last thing I want to talk about are referenced items. So if I go back and edit this page again, inspect content element 2, and I change its use from float to referenced. Referenced means that we're not going to display it on the page unless it is referenced by another content element. So this is really useful when you're trying to maybe embed an image or a link inside of an HTML object. So if I had an embedded picture, I might need to set the use element on a picture to reference so it doesn't display by default, and then I can reference it from the HTML image tag that's embedded in the page. Alright, so that's it for the use attribute. Simple and easy.